Deborah Stevenson. Deborah Stevenson? You have 5 minutes with a possible extension of 3 minutes. If you could give us your name for the record and the agenda item you're speaking to, I will remind you to please stick to the agenda item subject that you're addressing us. Thank you.
Just bear with me, I've got a few bits of paper around here that I need to look at. Okay, I'm speaking to question on notice 19/003, DA 508/17, new dwelling, lot 63, DP 1194047, George Batts Drive, Mossy Point. And that's a question on notice from Councillor Anthony Main. My name is Deborah Stevenson, and I'm a new resident to this Eurobodalla Shire. Can I start speaking? Sorry? Oh, I thought I would be introduced in terms of the question on notice. Sorry, that's just not what I'm used to. Okay, just for the councillors' information, before I start to speak, you'll find that you've got a PowerPoint presentation which I wasn't able to put onto PowerPoint, so sorry about that, you'll have to flick through it. There's a number of figures there. You also have another attachment which is, it's in black and blue, and it's my responses to Council's response to Councillor Anthony Main's question on notice. So they're the 2 additional documents that you have, which I'll refer to in my speech. First of all, I'd like to say good morning to you all, and I really appreciate the opportunity to address you and to present my information and to ask you questions. As I said, I'm a new resident in Eurobodalla, and I came here for the natural beauty of the Eurobodalla Shire. I have extensive experience in biodiversity assessment and management, as well as environmental planning and compliance at both state and Commonwealth levels, which involved working with councils across New South Wales on large development proposals and planning proposals, including biobanking and biocertification. Now, the site I'm talking to, if you look at figure 1, is heavily vegetated, as you can see. It's surrounded in red, and it's bordered on one side by the Tomaga River. If you turn to figure 2, it shows that the site is mapped as Class 2 acid sulphate soils, indicating that they're present close to the surface and can be disturbed by any works at the site. Figure 2 also shows that the site directly adjoins a state significant wetland, which is identified under the Coastal Management State Environmental Planning Policy. Turn to figure 3. Figure 3 shows that the site is mapped as bushfire prone land in the highest possible category, that's category 1. Turn to figures 4. Let's start with figure 4. Let's look at the biodiversity on the site. The site surveys have identified 3 endangered communities. So all of the site, except for that green bit down the bottom, is endangered vegetation. It also has a resident family of yellow-bellied gliders feeding endemic trees. If you turn over to figure 6, it will show you where those trees are across the site. It has greater broad-nosed bat, southern myotis and grey-headed flying fox, but there is also potential habitat for at least another 13 threatened species on that site that would not have been picked up during the survey work, which was only for 1 day and 5 nights, and that is not enough to pick up seasonal changes. Look at, sorry, I don't have a map for flooding, but the site is less than 10 metres above sea level and at its highest point, and has been mapped by Council as a flood prone. I couldn't put a map there because Council's GIS is off the system. The original Eurobodalla rural LEP required Council to take into consideration the potential impacts of climate change, including sea level rise, when considering whether to grant development consent to development on this block of land. Aboriginal heritage, the site is adjacent, as you can see, to a coastal estuary and some very extensive wetlands, and it would have been a favoured place by local Aboriginal people in the past, and is therefore likely to have very important values for them and also many objects of significance to them. Let's have a look at the development. If you please have a look at figure 7. That shows the footprint of the development. The location of the dwelling and associated infrastructure maximises the impacts on this site. The APZ requires a clearing of 32 metres around the dwelling, and a loop road or a turning circle has to be provided for firefighting vehicles. The access from Annette's Place is 720 metres through a densely forested area. They will need 3 passing bays for fire trucks to get through. An alternative access needs to be constructed 120 metres long from George Bass Drive into the site and will also clear more endangered vegetation. In addition, the site has no services and will need to be connected to services which will again disturb the endangered vegetation. The vegetation itself is in excellent condition. If you turn back to figure 5, you'll see a photo of it. There is the section which is going to be developed. If you turn to, sorry about this, if you turn to figure 8, the section which is going to be developed has regularly been slashed and had the large trees removed, despite the fact that it was an endangered community. Let's have a look at the zoning history of the site. If you turn to figure 9, you will see that in the past it was originally zoned 7F1 Environmental Protection Coastal Lands Protection under the 1987 Eurobodalla LEP. In 1992, against the advice of National Parks and Wildlife Service and a number of other state government agencies, the land was zoned 1C rural holdings. 5 years later, an 81-lot subdivision development application was submitted for the site. New South Wales National Parks and Wildlife strongly objected to this rezoning, particularly on the eastern side of George Bass Drive, so that the subdivision was on both sides of George Bass Drive. They said that the site was in an extremely sensitive location adjacent to a state significant wetland and the Tomaga River.
I apologise for interrupting. Your 5 minutes is up. Councillors, are there a mover and seconder for a 3-minute extension? Moved by Councillor McGinley, seconded by Councillor Mayne. Councillors, those in favour? You have a further 3 minutes.
Thank you. Okay, so they said that the site was too sensitive for subdivision, and council decided not to approve it on the eastern side but approved it on the western side. Now let's have a look at figure 10, the last figure. Under the current Eurobodalla LEP, the site was designated a deferred matter, which meant that development continued to be guided by the 1987 Eurobodalla LEP zoning, which was Rural 1C. In recognition of its sensitive nature, however, and the constraints on the site was subsequently zoned E2 Environmental Conservation under the Rural Land Review Planning Proposal, which is currently with the Department of Planning to go to the Planning Minister. This was consistent with the advice provided by OEH in 2016, which described it as a rare coastal remnant in natural condition, and the land was seen as unsuitable for development. Now, this leads me to a number of questions I have for Council. One is, why has Council worked so strenuously to zone this land for development, given its highly sensitive, constrained nature, and the strong objections not only from national parks as well as other state agencies? Question 2, why did Council approve development in the most sensitive part of the site, which is proposed to be zoned E2 under the current planning proposal, which is with the Department of Planning, and not the area of land along Annette's Parade, which is supposed to be zoned E4 which is proposed to be zoned E4 environmental living under the planning proposal that is currently with the Minister? OEH actually supported the land closest to Annette Parade being zoned E4 and for development. Third question, in determining to issue consent to this development, what weight did Council give to the Eurobodalla planning proposal, which is currently with the Minister? Under the EPNA Act, Council is, under the EPNA Act, it is expressly required that Council consider, when assessing a development application, the provisions of a proposed planning instrument that is or has been the subject of public consultation and has been notified to the consent authority, i.e. the Department of Planning. Question 4, did Council require an updated Aboriginal cultural heritage assessment for the development proposal? Because the last study done in this area was undertaken over 20 years ago, and there have been major changes to the legislation which protects Aboriginal heritage since then. Question 5, what stage is the development subject to DA number 50817 at? Council's DA tracker has been offline for 4 months. I haven't been able to get any information about it. Has the construction certificate been issued? Have the works formally commenced? If so, where can we, the public, view copies of the final vegetation management plan, the Section 88B instrument, which is supposed to be registered on the title of the land, the acid sulphate soil assessment and management plan, the construction management plan, the acid protection zone tree plan? Where are these documents? I have no access to any of them. Question 6, clearing of an endangered community requires a valid consent under the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act. a licence under the Threatened Species Act,
Your further
or
3
for land
minutes
zone
is
rural,
up. Thank
it
you.
needs to have an asset.
Thank you for your presentation.
I'm just going to finish this one
No,
question.
I'm sorry,
Thank you
but
for
your further 3 minutes is up.
There
I
are
already
no
gave you an
assets on this
extension
development
of
site,
1
so
minute,
how
so
did
I'm
they
going
get
to ask
approval
you
to
to
clear
finish
the
your
vegetation?
presentation. Thank
Is
you
there
very
a
much
history of
for
illegal
your
clearing on this
presentation this
site?
morning.
Thank
I'd
you.
ask you to stop.
I have.
Councillors may have some questions for you if you'd like to remain seated. Thank you. Councillors, Councillor Mayne.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Ms Stevenson, for your presentation. I couldn't actually pick up the last point you were making. Could you just finish that?
I was trying to point out that there's been clearing on this site which has been listed as an endangered community for about 16 years, and it seems to me that nothing has happened. They either need an approval under the EPA Act or a licence under the Threatened Species Act, or if it's zoned rural, which it is, there needs to be some asset that needs to be protected for them to be able to clear. As far as I can see, there are no assets on the site, and I would assume that this is illegal clearing. So Council has in fact granted development consent as a reward for illegal clearing an endangered community, which I find unacceptable in my experience, my long experience in working for the state and Commonwealth Government in these areas.
Yep, I'm waiting to be asked.
Councillor Mayne.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you. I'm just wondering if you, look, I noticed, I heard your background. Could you just give us a little bit more clarification as to your background? Why I ask is because my follow-up question is also, given the nature and the complexity of some of the points you've raised, would you be interested if we as a council were to receive a formal briefing on some of these points as well? Because I'd be interested to hear a bit more, because there's a lot in this. Thank you.
Yes, I'm quite happy to
Point of
give...
order. I think at any stage, up until including today and briefings, Councillor Mayne has had the opportunity to inquire along those lines from any of our staff, including the Director of Planning, who might have a rough idea on some of these things. And so I would rule that his question is entirely out of order. It was entirely within his own province to seek out that detail well prior to this meeting.
I agree. I'd ask you to withdraw that question, Councillor Mayne.
Do I get an opportunity to respond,
Find a
Madam
question
Mayor?
that's relevant. Yes, you
Well,
can respond.
Could I just say, this is a question raised, points raised by obviously a qualified individual who has brought it to this council and has just articulated any number of points, probably ad-libbed a number of them.
Councillor,
I'm seeking
the point of
clarification.
order is around whether it is appropriate for you to ask a member of the public whether they have an opinion whether we should have a briefing or not. Councillor, that is entirely your prerogative to ask questions of our director and to seek briefings. Thank you, Councillor Mayne. Well, that'd be a nice change. I'm not shutting you down at all, Councillor.
I'll seek clarification, thank you. Could you just clarify your last comment? I don't understand. I'm not sure if you got out the wrong side of bed this morning, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Councillor Tate.
Through you, Madam Mayor. Thank you very much for your presentation today. You tell us that you've just shifted to the area.
That's right.
Which is nice to have you here. Could you just tell me on figure 5
Yep.
and on figure 8, these photos were taken in 2016. Can you tell me where you got those photos from, please?
Figure 5 and figure 8 came from the flora and fauna assessment and the bushfire assessment report for this development application.
The photos?
Yep. Yep.
So they're on a website somewhere?
They're in documents that are on a website, yes.
Okay, thank you.
But not the council's website because it's not up.
Councillor Nathan.
Further to, thank you, Madam Mayor. Deborah, that was certainly a very professional presentation. And given your experience as a new resident, could you give me an idea, were you involved in any of the advices that came to the council from National Parks and other agencies?
No, my experience with National Parks, OEH, DEC, DECWA and the Commonwealth were all in other parts of New South Wales. So I was based in Sydney and the Hunter Valley and also worked out in Western New South Wales.
Thank you. And further to that, do you live close to this particular area in George Bass Drive?
No, I don't.
Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.